Welcome to That One Time with Adam Metwally, the podcast conversing the pillars of health, wealth, and wisdom. We are at the beautiful Music for a While studio, and I'm with Dr. Jonathan Kuo. Hi, Dr. Kuo. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, such a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you, my man. Good to have you.
Yeah.
This is a long time coming. So
yes, we've been talking about this for a little while.
We have. Yeah. We've got a lot to get into. So what is stress and anxiety? What do those words mean? And what is causing the increase in prevalence of it in the world in 2025?
Stress and anxiety, I feel, is a super common topic now. I think a lot of the stressors of modern life, what's going on in the world, the kind of deluge of information and, from different sources is, causing a lot of people to be imbalanced in their kind of fight or flight and rest and relax states. And so stress and anxiety kind of go hand in hand. If you're living in New York City and, doing all the things, like you're going to be feeling these things at some point. Yeah, definitely. So how does it tie in with trauma, stress, anxiety, and trauma? How do those things tie into one another? Well, trauma, if you've had trauma, definitely causes stress and anxiety, especially anxiety. I think all three of these things are very well intertwined. I mean, if you have one of them, you probably have some component of the other two as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's from your experience, what do you think is the biggest, most impactful pillar to break down, to begin to reset your nervous system to move away from being highly strung and highly stressed?
Well, I mean, there's the kind of more conservative ways of trying to improve your kind of rest and relax state. I mean, getting away from the trauma or anxiety inducing life factors and situations. And then there's the breathing, the meditation, the exercise, kind of the grounding. Those are kind of the basic methods. And then, if you kind of need something a little extra, then, the kind of the things that we offer at Extension Health are meant to kind of be that next level of intervention.
Yeah. And what do you offer? Like what's the most interesting things you're working on at the moment in this space?
So we have a division that is specifically for mental health, and that's the interventional mental health division that I started a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And interventional mental health to us basically means using more techniques to fundamentally change the course of anxiety or PTSD or even depression. And so this is a combination of therapies. We do a very special procedure called the neuro reset, which is the injection in the neck that blocks the fight or flight state by injecting the stellate ganglion. And then we also do a vagus nerve injection.
What is it injected with?
The stellate ganglion is injected with a long-acting local anesthetic, similar to lidocaine. Okay, and what that does is it blocks the nerve signal pathways and resets them. Once those nerves actually come back online, they work a little differently. They are slower in firing, and so it kind of slows down and kind of resets the fight or flight state of your body by blocking those nerves. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I recently bought one of those vagus nerve stimulators, and I'm not really sure if it's doing anything.
Yes. Vagal nerve stimulation and the vagus nerve is a hot topic these days, and there's quite a few kind of devices out there that can kind of help with that. In our specific case, we actually inject the vagus nerve directly. This is, I'm one of the very few physicians that does this, but, the vagus nerve is located kind of next to the carotid artery, and under ultrasound guidance, you can actually get right next to that nerve and inject it. Okay?
Yeah.
And kind of what we call doing a hydrodissection of the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And so next to the vagus nerve, we put a combination of things that can be helpful for a nerve, such as glucose or dextrose. We put peptides, and sometimes we put exosomes or growth factors next to that nerve. By hydrodissecting that nerve, you free up the nerve and kind of bathe it in a column of fluid. Okay. And so the theory is that can help with the function of the vagus nerve, which is, the largest cranial nerve in the body, and also is responsible for a lot of the communication from your body to your brain. So it innervates the diaphragm, the gut. It's responsible for your immune system. It's responsible for a lot of things. And so, by strengthening and improving the function of the vagus nerve, can you potentially improve all these functions? Yeah.
So with this vagus nerve stimulator that I bought, am I wasting my time here, or are they actually useful?
No. I mean, I think they can be certainly useful. I think there's a lot of data these days. There's quite a few stimulators out there that I think are quite helpful. I've actually played around with a lot of them because this is kind of what, is a subject matter of interest to me. Yeah.
Do you have a preference, one that you like the most?
Yeah, I mean, I like one by Hoolist. You know, that's a good one. I like one by Parasim.
Yeah, I've got that one.
Yeah, the
Parasim. Very expensive though.
Yes, they are. But you know, I mean, I do think they help. You know, Parasim, they have a lot of data actually supporting their kind of usage. So I'm a fan. You know, I mean, clinically we are actually, you know, actively studying the vagus nerve injection. We're in a study right now recruiting patients to kind of see what changes we see with a vagus nerve injection, looking at parasympathetic symptom scores, looking at HRV, resting heart rate, things like that. So we're, in the active process of, you know, writing a paper on that.
Can I join the study?
Absolutely.
That sounds fun. I'm actually down.
Okay.
Are there any risks? Like what's the potential downside of all of this? I mean, needles kind of freak me out a little bit.
Well, I mean, it's an injection in the neck. Okay, it's done under ultrasound guidance. It does require a skilled operator because this nerve is actually right next to the carotid artery. But you know, we've done several hundred cases at this point, at the very least, and you know, under skilled operator, like you know, I think you're going to be fine. Yeah.
So, do you do this whole procedure yourself, or do you have someone else who does it? Like, what's? Oh,
I'm the main one that does it. You know, our other physicians are trained to do it, but I've probably done, you know, over 2,000 or 3,000 of these neuro resets at this point. It's one of the things that kind of I'm known for, and people kind of travel in to see me for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, count me in. That sounds interesting.
Okay.
Maybe we'll vlog about it.
We'll document the whole thing.
That could be really fun. I'd be down.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you began the mental health. It's an interventionist mental health arm of the business recently. What sparked you to want to do that?
I was an interventional pain specialist by training. Okay. And so I've been doing that for 16 years at this point. And you know, everyone that suffers from chronic pain also has anxiety. The comorbidities of anxiety and depression are very prevalent in the chronic pain population. And so, you know, I'm someone that, you know, really likes to kind of think broadly and try to fix root cause issues. If you can improve someone's anxiety and depression, you can actually, you know, really help with their chronic pain. And so that's kind of what led me down this path of interventional mental health. And that was kind of the thing that I'd created before I started the Longevity Center Extension Health. So the interventional mental health was called Hudson Minds, which is a company that we still run right now. And once again, that's we have a psychiatrist that leads a team, and we do ketamine, the neuro resets, and transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
What have you found to be the most impactful one? You spoke about a bunch of them.
Yeah.
What have you found to be, the most impactful one from the overnight instant changes that last?
Yeah, I mean, all three of these things can be quite impactful. I mean, kind of done kind of synergistically, I think you get the best results. The neuro reset, or the stellate ganglion block, is really quite effective for PTSD. Okay, and so for people that actually have bad PTSD, this can be a real game changer, like a real life changer, almost overnight, because it's a physiological reset of that kind of overactive sympathetic nervous system that's causing PTSD. That's one of the root causes of that. All right. Ketamine is another one that I find is a very useful medication when used appropriately. A very rapid antidepressant. Like people in kind of very depressed states usually respond well to ketamine. And then transcranial magnet, TMS, we have several protocols, like a SAINT accelerated protocol. Also works very well for depression by stimulating the areas of your brain to kind of increase the neurotransmitter levels. The combination of TMS and IV ketamine for depression is, in my opinion, just much more useful than being on SSRIs indefinitely. Well,
the SSRI thing is quite interesting. I read that there was a big breakdown of kind of the landmark study around SSRIs recently that came out. Well, let's talk about that. So they've been prescribed pretty heavily since the 80s?
Yes.
But it's no better than a placebo. Is that where it's gotten to?
I wouldn't say that's no better than a placebo. Okay. I would say that the non-responder rate is quite high. Okay.
What is a non-responder rate for somebody that's not understanding?
I'm not going to quote exact numbers now, but I believe up to a third of people are just, the medications don't really work for them.
For a third of people?
Up to a third of people, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when they do they work effectively, or is it just a numbing agent that doesn't solve anything?
In a lot of cases, it is kind of a numbing agent. People feel a little ahedonic, or they you lose your sexual drive. There's like a whole bunch of side effects to these medications. And it's, not something that I think people should be on indefinitely for years and years and years.
Yeah.
That's why kind of some of these interventional procedures can help. And we've successfully gotten hundreds of people off psych meds using these methods. So, there's definitely a place for some of these medications. I'm not saying that they're
what's the place?
Useless. It still does help with depression. Okay. Like in some cases, you would still need a pharmacological support for some of these patients. There are kind of the other ways these days to manage these things in a more effective manner is my opinion.
Yeah. Is it, are they cost effective versus some of these protocols that you're working through?
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, insurance coverage is quite lacking.
Yeah.
Only very recently are things like stellate ganglion blocks and even IV ketamine. There's some startups working on coverage for that, but traditionally insurance companies do not cover these modalities. And, if you look at the lifetime value, if some of these interventions are really quite helpful in getting people off medications, then, and also the medication associated side effects and this and that, do I think they're cost effective? I do. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to understand your exploration of, say, the root cause versus symptom masking, and how you think about that, and what kind of markers or tests or investigations you use to find root causes in stress and anxiety and depression.
Well, specifically for stress, anxiety, and depression, a lot of these can be kind of linked to, the levels of inflammation in your body. Neuroinflammation can cause a whole bunch of psychiatric conditions. Gut inflammation can cause a bunch of conditions, celiac, SIBO. Like there's so many kind of mental health can be a manifestation of a physical dysfunction. Okay.
And it's usually an inflammation dysfunction.
Yeah. I mean, that's being a little broad termed on that, but neuroinflammation can cause all sorts of psychiatric issues, you know, and there's a lot of, books and, podcasts that talk about the importance of diet in managing mental health illnesses. Some people do better on, say a ketogenic diet. Some people do much better on a low inflammatory diet. The diet really matters. And so you can actually fix a lot of these issues with just fixing your diet.
Yeah. Really? Yeah. So let's just say I've come in to your clinic and I'm stressed out of my mind, extremely anxious, just a roller coaster of emotions. What would be a basic foundational protocol that you would put me on?
Well, we would kind of, a thorough evaluation does include like your biomarkers, your blood work and all that stuff as well. You would want to look at the hormones. You would want to look at inflammatory markers. You would want to look at metabolic function. Yep. And so those are basics you kind of want to optimize first. And then, even in some people, if all those things are optimized, like you can still be in a kind of, excessive fight or flight mode just because of life situations or trauma or things like that. And that's where things like the, either, ketamine can be helpful. The neuro recess can be very helpful. In some cases, TMS, transcranial magnetic, can be very helpful. It all depends, but you do want to look holistically at a person. I mean, psychiatrists, I don't think are, most psychiatrists are not like looking at your blood work and looking at whether your hormones are optimized. But guess what? Having optimized hormones means, it definitely has an impact on mental health.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to a therapist for a while and we would go back and forth for a number of years. And then one day he turns around and says to me, what if none of this anxiety that you're feeling, because there was a lot of anxiety, none of this is actually trauma related, and you've just got some physical issue. And I never thought of that as a potential thing. So I went back to the doctor and did some gut checks, and turns out there's like a bunch of gut dysbiosis. And
there you go.
And then, over the next, few years, and very recently, actually, I've begun to really work on focusing on the gut side of things. And though the anxiety levels have just gone through the floor. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, very important to look at, the gut is actually responsible for like 80% of our hormone production in our body. So, the gut is a source of so many issues.
Yeah. Well, let's sit on inflammation for a little bit longer. What are some major causes of inflammation that you see in the current, 2025 modern world?
What are some of the causes of inflammation? I mean, it's, a lot of them are the kind of lifestyle related, right? Mm-hmm. Poor sleep, lack of exercise, poor diet. I mean, those things are the major drivers of inflammation.
How does that work?
A poor diet leads to inflammation. Mm-hmm. It's a poor diet leads to, gut dysbiosis, ultra processed foods, a lot of the simple sugars, those can cause inflammation. Those can actually, the metabolic process of what happens there is, your body needs to kind of process those kind of nutrients, and the glucose spikes that you get, your body needs to deal with by secreting insulin. Like high glucose spikes and high glucose levels cause inflammation.
Really? So is the process of excretion of insulin a cause of inflammation? Is that how it works? I don't know how it works biomechanically.
Your body secretes insulin in response to glucose in your system. Mm-hmm. If you have, repeated very high kind of glucose loads, your body becomes insulin resistant. Mm. If your body becomes insulin resistant, your glucose levels and your hemoglobin A1C can increase. Mm. And so the higher circulating levels of glucose in your system can cause damage and inflammation to various systems. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the lack of exercise, good quality exercise, how does that affect you on inflammation level? Because doesn't exercise cause some form of inflammation in the body?
Yes, a good form of inflammation. Okay, like your body needs like hormetic stresses to function optimally. Like all your systems, your musculoskeletal system, your cardiovascular system needs kind of these like inputs, these hormetic exercise inputs to kind of function optimally. Mm-hmm. And so, exercise releases a cascade of signaling molecules in your body that are actually beneficial. Mm-hmm. Does it stir up a little bit of inflammation? Yes. Okay. But exercise also just, improves blood flow. Improving blood flow throughout the body kind of helps you eliminate some toxic waste and metabolic buildup in your cells. Mm-hmm. So having adequate levels of, exercise and hydration to kind of get some toxic metabolic byproducts out of your system is very important.
Okay. Yeah. And then sleep, what's the inflammation process around sleep?
Yeah. As we sleep, the sleep is the most restorative process. That's when our, brain is kind of going through, it circulates the CSF and, just basically taking out some of the metabolic waste that's accumulated through the day. Mm-hmm. And so that process is very important for kind of brain health in general. I mean, and then, when you don't remove these toxic metabolic processes that are part of a natural cellular process, then that can lead to inflammation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So touching on hormetic stress for a little bit longer, what are your thoughts around the sauna and cold plunge, or the increases of sauna and cold plunge in day-to-day society?
I think they're great. Yeah. I think they're great. There's plenty of literature that says sauna, is very beneficial. And so, I see it as an exercise of your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. As I mentioned, like all of your body systems need kind of stimuli in various directions to kind of function at their best. Mm-hmm. And so, when you're sauna, you're vasodilating, you're sweating, you're kind of letting out toxins. Mm-hmm. And then the cold plunges too. They're kind of shocking your system. Your body releases a whole bunch of cascade of, chemicals and heat shock proteins and things like that, that kind of rapid vasodilation and then vasoconstriction. You're really also just, you can think of those blood vessels as kind of pumping things in and out. Mm-hmm. And so good for cellular health, good for metabolic health, good for mitochondrial health. I think they are both great. Yeah.
Do you know of an optimum time for saunas and cold plunges a week?
I don't know the optimal level off the top of my head. There's a lot of Finnish studies that, demonstrate, it's several times a week of sauna. I don't think the literature is quite there yet in terms of cold plunges and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cold reduces inflammation. Okay. And so that's a kind of a good, easy way to think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I read somewhere that if you're looking to build muscle, you wouldn't want to do a cold plunge after working out because you are blunting the inflammation response, and that inflammation response is a positive. Do you know much around that?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. I would say that is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be the positives of, so would you say that maybe you do a cold plunge if you're, say, training for a marathon and you're just trying to survive and you're not trying to let your body break down, as opposed to building and growing?
I would just say avoid cold plunges immediately after exercise.
Yeah.
Several hours after exercise, it can certainly, I think you can do it then. I like doing cold plunges first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
You can just take a cold shower.
Yeah.
If you want, or you can you can just dunk your face in cold water, because a lot of the receptors are kind of in the kind of craniofacial region. So
yeah.
Poor man's cold plunge.
Yeah, just a bucket of cold water. Yeah, for sure. Look, I want to go back a little bit, because there's you've got a lot of experience, you've got a lot of history. You're pioneering a very, very interesting field of longevity. How did we get here? So I'd love to hear your earlier years and the processes that got you to this point.
Sure. I trained originally as an anesthesiologist and an interventional pain management specialist. I did my residency here at Cornell Columbia here in New York City. And subsequently I started a practice, and my first practice was in interventional pain management. So interventional pain management is basically the use of, nerve blocks, steroid injections, epidurals, radiofrequency ablations to treat chronic pain. And so I did this in high volumes. I actually built one of New York City's busiest pain clinics. But, after a while, you just realize that you're basically slapping Band-Aids on all these problems. And, patients would feel better for a few months and then come back and they'd have the exact same pain. And so, you're helping them functionally for 3 months, but then they come back and they're inevitably in decline. Okay. And so what can you do to actually fix these problems or get down to the root cause of these issues? And that's what kind of led me down the path of regenerative medicine. So regenerative medicine is the use of things like PRP, platelets, or stem cells to kind of encourage your body's own natural healing process. The body has a really good innate system of healing. When we're young and you get cuts and scrapes, like, you heal really quick. As you get a little older, our stem cells and regenerative capabilities decrease over time. The stem cells get exhausted. They don't function as well. There's a lot of senescence in your stem cells as you get older. And so, what are some kind of ways to kind of fix chronic pain? I would say regenerative medicine is kind of very high on that list, right? Yeah. The use of platelets, stem cells. And so that's how I got into regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine at its core, okay, is really about cellular function, all right? Because regenerative medicine helps improve the environment of these cells, okay? And so it comes down to basic cellular function and physiology. If your cells are functioning in the right environment, if your cells have the right kind of microenvironment, they're going to thrive, okay? They're going to function, they're going to thrive. If your cells are going to thrive, then you're going to have good physiology, okay? So you think about physiology and cellular medicine, and that's kind of the basis of longevity medicine. Longevity medicine is just optimizing your physiology and your basic cellular functions.
What made you want to be an anesthesiologist? Like, why did you choose that as your pathway?
I was always interested in, very interested in how the body works, the plumbing of the body, the body is so fascinating. And even now there's so many things that we still don't understand. It's an all encompassing field, and to really truly understand, human, function, that's kind of the field that I picked. And then I also picked pain management because, I wanted to do something that was a little more kind of, using my hands, instant gratification, kind of procedural. I played a lot of video games when I was a kid.
Dopamine hits.
yeah. You know, the long-term relationship with patients is something I really enjoy. I've been seeing some patients for, you know, over 10, 15 years now.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of relationship brings me a lot of joy. And so that's what got me into interventional pain management. And, you know, now longevity medicine is a field that I really enjoy because I enjoy making fundamental changes to a person's health. Yeah.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Taiwan.
Okay.
I was born in Taiwan. I was in Taiwan until I was, you know, in middle school.
Yeah.
And then I came to the US.
Did your whole family come over?
Yeah, my whole family came over. My father kind of worked for the embassy. And so, you know, we had exposure to the US from a very young age. So I kind of traveled back and forth, but I kind of formally moved to the US when I was 16.
Was your English solid at that time? It was kind of pretty, you spoke multiple languages?
I speak Mandarin and Cantonese pretty fluently, but you know, those are my kind of first languages, but hopefully my English is decent enough.
Your English is good. Yeah. Oh, I wonder when you came to America, how was that transition?
It was pretty rough.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, even though like I had basic language skills, I mean, you know, the cultures are actually very different.
Yeah.
You know, like starting high school as a foreigner is like, you know, all these kids have been in
jungle.
You know, all these kids have already kind of been through elementary school together. There's like, you know, bands and cliques and social groups and this and that. And kind of had to, you know, find my own place and do my own thing, but you know, I managed.
How did that process impact you in your pathway to medicine, do you think?
I mean, it definitely lent me an edge, I think, to my career, as in, you know, when I first started my practice, you know, we're located in downtown Manhattan and Chinatown's right there. And, you know, I was basically the only kind of like Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese speaking pain doctor. And so I was actually able to build up a practice really quickly.
Nice.
Based on that patient clientele. And honestly, to this day, I still see them. You know, it's almost like serving the community. And I love that, you know?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Did you, because you're a double board certified doctor, right?
Yes.
I didn't know what that meant before I researched you. It sounds like a very complex amount of study. So how was the cultural differences a positive into making you study really hard and go above and beyond everything you did?
I mean, you know, Asian tiger parents. I mean, the school system in Taiwan is a very rigorous academic system, and so, you know, you're kind of, you know, not forced, but like really encouraged to make academics like the number one priority. And, you know, I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. And so I actually enrolled in a 7-year medical program right after high school. Yeah. I went to Boston University for that. And, you know, it was just something I knew that I wanted to do from a very early age. Yeah. And, that just kind of, you know, that's just kind of carried me through on my career path until this day. Yeah.
So you made your parents proud.
Well, you can never make Asian parents proud enough. So
that's funny.
No, they're proud of me, but you know, they still give me shit all the time.
Oh, I bet. That's good. It drives you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's this can be an interesting segue. You're an artist as well, right?
I am. Yeah. I've always had a creative side. You know, I grew up playing instruments and piano and stuff like that. And then I kind of got into a whole bunch of like mixed media artwork and, you know, I haven't done as much of it recently, but yeah, for a period of time, I produced a bunch of works that, you know, I was able to go on some international art fairs. Had some pieces at Art Basel. I sold a bunch of stuff and it was just a fun little side gig, I guess. Yeah. But, you know, having creativity in medicine, I think is a really good thing. It kind of allows you to think outside the box a little bit. Okay. Yeah. And so, you know, coming up with creative solutions that are not just, you know, bound by traditional medicine is kind of how I got to, you know, what I'm kind of doing these days. And even these days, you know, I feel like, you know, being creative in terms of, you know, different modalities, stacking different modalities, thinking about, you know, the way various things can work together. is a process, right? You know, the different kinds of peptides that we have these days, the different formulations that we have, you know, constantly trying to improve and kind of, you know, improve on that process is something that I just, you know, constantly want to do. Just, you know, innovation and try to be creative at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good outlet. I feel like the rigidity of a lot of the medical fields seems to be a bit of its downfall.
Yes. I mean, it is a downfall, but I also kind of understand why it's there. Like medicine is a very conservative field. Okay. Like, you know, especially academic medicine is a very conservative field. The FDA and, you know, there's just a lot of regulations around how you should practice medicine. It's also a very litigious society. So, you know, how far outside the bounds can you step really?
Yeah.
You know, you're also kind of trained not to step outside the bounds. And so therefore, you know, a lot of doctors are, you know, conformist and everyone's trying to do the right thing and do the right job. But, you know, I don't know, modern day solutions require modern day problems require modern day solutions. And there's a lot out there that, you know, if you're not out there constantly learning and figuring out what's new and effective, like, you know, stuff that I learned in residency is just not really relevant anymore.
Yeah.
You know, stuff that I was doing 5 years ago might not be relevant these days. So just, you always have to be innovative. You also have to think outside the box. You have to, you know, connect with peers, really understand what's going on out there. Yeah, I think that's very important.
So how do you balance that conservatism and that potential fear of litigation around being at the forefront of medicine? Because it's kind of like a risk-taking endeavor almost.
Yes. I mean, you know, you think carefully and take very calculated risks. Okay.
Slow down.
Slow down. As in, you know, it also comes with experience. You know, I've, you know, throughout my career, I've seen, you know, probably 50,000 patients at this point, you know, and you do have to push the limits, I think, okay, in some cases, but you do have to kind of respect the boundaries as well. It's a fine line. It's a fine line that you have to toe. And I want to be innovative. I kind of want to be at the forefront of science. You know, a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily have like, you know, long-term human clinical data that's double-blinded, randomized. Like it doesn't have that kind of data.
Is that necessary?
That's the question. That's the question these days,
what do you think?
I mean, you know, the gold standard is still the randomized double-blind clinical study.
Isn't the meta-analysis of the randomized double-blind clinical studies?
Yes. But, you know, I mean, first of all, those are very expensive, hard to do. Okay. And some of them you just can't really do.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a lot of times you are just going to really kind of understand the, you know, the actual physiology and the pathway of some of these, how some of these things work. Okay. Like I'll just give you an example of peptides, right? Like peptides are naturally produced in the body. They're very simple molecules. They're just a few amino acids strung together. All right. They break down into inactive metabolites. Like, you know, these are going to be safe, right? Even if you don't have long-term human data on BPC 157, you know, we know that it's safe, you know, and I can confidently say that it's safe also just based on, you know, many
First
years
principles.
and thousands of patients that I've seen that I've put on these.
Yeah.
I can tell you that it's safe. Do I have the kind of clinical human grade study and evidence to back that up? I don't, right? That doesn't really exist in the literature right now.
How do you approach this without having the clinical support? Do you create that yourself? Do you do your own studies? Just quickly though, I love doing this podcast. If it's positively impacted you in some way and you would like to support us, please subscribe. By subscribing, it allows us to build a much bigger base of listeners, which results in better guests, better production, and a better show overall. Alternatively, please take a look at the affiliate links of the products that I use and love in the comments below and consider purchasing using those links. They'll give you a discount and they'll also provide the podcast a small kickback. These are two very easy ways for you to support us as we continue to grow the podcast that we absolutely love doing. Thank you for your support, and now back to the episode.
I've done quite a few studies internally. We've looked at, you know, stellate ganglion blocks and treating long COVID. We found positive results with that. We have clinical studies looking at exosomes in the epidural space to treat pain. We've done that for the facet joints as well. We published 2 studies there. We're currently looking at this vagus nerve hydrodissection to see how that works. I've done a small amount of research, as much as a small private practice can do, but
is it expensive?
We're always trying. I mean, yes, it is, to kind of do the write-ups, to kind of publish them. You need the staff, you need the coordination, you need people to kind of write these reports and gather the data and analyze it and write the papers. Like, yes, it's human capital. And, at the end of the day, it's not, I'm just contributing to a body of literature and trying to investigating an idea that I think is valid.
Yeah.
It's, once again, we're a, small private, self-funded private practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's the process around that usually? So you come up with an idea and then you have to...
I come up with the idea, something that we're doing clinically, and say, hey, you know what, we would like some clinical evidence, actual data to back this up. And so, as an example, we've been using these neuro reset stellate ganglions to treat people with long COVID, with dysautonomia, with POTS, with kind of those kind of symptoms. Yeah. We know that it works clinically. Like, how can we prove that? So, write the paper and gather the data. Yeah. And so we actually demonstrated that is quite effective. Yeah.
So when you're doing these studies, how many people do you tend to get into the study? What's the kind of the minimum effective amount for it to be statistically significant?
I mean, depends on how great, it depends on the magnitude of your results, right? Yeah. If you think something's going to be very effective, you probably don't need a high end number. If you think something's only going to be marginally effective, then yes, you need a lot of patients to demonstrate that. One of the things I'll also mention is we're doing we're collaborating with NYU on a study looking at these stellate ganglion blocks and neuro resets on functional change, fMRI changes in the brain. And so we've actually completed most of this study so far. And yes, guess what? The procedure does work. It improves blood flow to certain areas of the brain. You do see functional MRI changes, and there's a significant drop in PTSD scores. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Nice. Before we move on to some of your personal stuff, before we move on from some of the personal stuff, I'd love to know, given that you are right in the heart of longevity medicine, what is your daily routine and kind of habits look like?
Oh, my personal one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe the ideal for you. I know there's always an ideal that you aim to have. Maybe that list is written somewhere and you get it half the time.
Sure. I mean,
what does it sound like?
You know what? I drink my own Kool-Aid. Okay. So I do basically everything that I recommend for patients, like my daily routine.
So start from the morning. When are you getting up? What are you doing?
I wake up, I meditate.
Yeah. How long do you meditate?
I meditate for 20 minutes, I would say, on average.
Is there a style of meditation you like?
A silent kind of vipassana kind of, self-reflecting kind of thing. Then I try to get direct sunlight exposure for, X amount of minutes. And then my morning routine is, I have a sauna, so I get in my sauna, and then I will, then embark on a morning routine of peptides. There are usually around 6 to 10 peptides that I'm currently on and that I kind of rotate through on time.
What are they?
Various peptides for inflammation, for metabolic health, for hormones, for, various peptides for metabolic health, inflammation, hormonal support. I take a bunch of supplements as well. The NMN, NAD, I take urolithin A, I take my metformin, I take rapamycin. Those are things I do. Peptide wise, I rotate between BPC TB4. I do 3-month cycles of that. Okay. GHKCU, I do 3-month cycles of. I do 2.
So 3 months on, 3 months off?
3 months on, 1 month off.
Okay.
Yeah, of the 3 anti-inflammatory peptides.
Yeah. Why do you take a month off?
Just to let the body kind of reset a little bit of the receptors. And it's always good to take little breaks. Okay. You don't need to kind of stimulate the same pathways continuously for a very long time. Growth hormone peptides, I cycle between CJC, ipamorelin, and testosterone. I do that 1 month on, 1 month off of CJC, and then I'll do IPA and CJC, IPA, then I'll do Tessa, and then I'll take a month off. I am on a rotating schedule of HCG and enclomiphene. I kind of alternate those month by month, kind of for my testosterone levels. I take thymosin alpha 1 probably once every quarter, especially on the shoulder seasons. I find that really helps my immune system. I take pinealon for sleep. It improves my deep sleep. It actually.
Wait, what is that?
Pinealon is a tripeptide that's a pineal bioregulator. So what that does is it actually improves the melatonin secretion naturally from your pineal gland, regulates your sleep-wake cycles, and helps with your circadian rhythm. So
Pinealon.
Interesting.
Yeah. Would that be good for jet lag?
It can be. Yeah. Pinealon and Epilon are good for jet lag. Yeah.
So cool. I've never heard of that. So is that a better way to approach sleep than taking melatonin?
I think so. Yeah, because it actually increases your body's natural ability to produce melatonin.
Yeah. Is that usually the goal, especially with hormones, to improve the internal production?
Correct. The kind of goal and process of peptides is to stimulate your body's own natural processes to increase the amount of growth hormone you're secreting, the amount of anti-inflammatories that you're secreting, the amount of collagen that you're producing. And so, cycles of these peptides I've been on for many years at this point, I think have made me, I think I'm the healthiest state that I've been, back in my kind of 30s before I was doing all this. I was actually, suffering from some health conditions that I kind of really couldn't figure out. And so that's another kind of reason why I kind of got into this field.
Yeah. So what would, if I was to go, all right, I'm going to do all this, how much is this going to cost me a month?
Hey, listen, I mean, peptides can be pricey.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we're always trying to democratize the process and get people the lowest prices we can, but hey, it's one of those things where, we try our best. They can still be pricey. Okay. A peptide for a month is typically around $250 to $300. Yeah. And so, when you kind of add them all up, they can be a little pricey, GLPs, I'm a fan of GLPs for just longevity in general.
And stuff.
Yeah. It's the semaglutide, it's the tirzepatide, and the newest retatrutide.
Yeah.
And so those can get a little pricey, several $100s a month. But it's, they help, I take a bunch of nootropics as well. I do a bunch of these. I like C-Lank. I like C-Max. C-Lank is actually really good for anxiety. We actually have that as a nasal spray. SELANK, C-Lank.
Okay.
The injectable form of C-Lank is one of the actual, things that I feel like can help with anxiety quite a bit. And so that's in our anxiety protocols. We do a neuro reset and put people on C-Lank, whether it's injectable or a nasal spray. There's some kind of other nootropic, peptide nasal sprays that we have and that I use. Nupept with a combination of NAD, NMN, and L-carnosine is something that I like. And then, the mitochondrial peptides I like a lot too. I cycle between NAD, SS31, and MOTS-C.
What do you think of methylene blue?
You have some in there? I love methylene blue.
This is not blue Gatorade. It technically is. It's methylene blue and it's electrolytes. So it's kind of like it.
Great. Yeah, I use methylene blue quite a bit clinically. It improves kind of brain metabolic rate, can help with cognitive function.
Yeah. I feel very sharp. Since I started taking that, I'm dialed in on a level that I haven't been in a long time.
Really?
Yeah, it's been really nice.
Great. Yeah, we give that as an IV infusion quite frequently in our clinic. I do take that as well. Yeah. Not on a daily basis, but I kind of like rotate through nootropics.
Yeah.
Just to kind of stimulate different receptors,
Yeah. It's a lot to take on for someone not in the world of it. So what would you say based on peptides, based on nootropics, based on maybe just simple supplements, what would be a solid basic foundational stack that, anyone could take and see noticeable improvements in general health markers?
If I had to pick one, it would be a microdosing of GLP-1. Okay. Oh, wow. Whether you microdose it or you're taking an actual dose to try to lose weight, I think
even if you're healthy, even if you're not overweight.
Yeah. I put a lot of people on microdose GLP-1s just for the longevity benefits.
What are the longevity benefits?
Yes. Fundamentally, it makes you more metabolically flexible.
Wow.
Okay. It makes your body more sensitive to insulin. Fundamentally, because of that reason, it lowers inflammation. All right. And so there's actually many studies now that show that it's neuroprotective, cardioprotective, renal protective. There's just so many benefits from taking low doses of this, of a GLP-1.
So what would be a dosage? Like I'm 200 pounds. What's a reasonable dosage of microdosing it?
If you're on tirzepatide, it could be anywhere from a quarter to a half of the starting dose.
Okay.
Sometimes I like, people taking this, even 3 to 5 times a week.
Yeah.
All right. You can divide like a starting dose into 5 and kind of microdose it that way. Once again, just makes your body more sensitive to insulin. The body's sensitivity to insulin does decrease over age. Okay. And so, that metabolic flexibility, that decrease in inflammation drives a lot of the processes in the body. And so at this point, unless there's a real contraindication, this is one of the things I like a lot.
What kind of contraindications can there be? Because I find this quite fascinating. One of my close friends has a company that does this, and they're doing some crazy numbers, some really, really big numbers.
Yeah. I mean, last I heard, 6 to 8% of Americans are on GLPs already. And, what's the potential kind of percentage of population that could be on them?
30% maybe.
It could be even higher, right? If we're kind of using it for microdosing for kind of, other purposes, like, the neuroprotective, cardioprotective purposes, you could theoretically think that, man, almost everyone could be on a GLP, right?
Yeah.
Absolute contraindications. I mean, if you like semaglutide has, potential risk of increasing like thyroid medullary cancer. If you have any kind of, very severe active disease, you kind of need to deal with that kind of stuff first. If you're, really anorexic or cachectic, like that's not something that you want to start.
Yeah.
There are side effects to these medications. And, it's very well documented that when you lose weight, you're going to also lose muscle mass. And being counseled properly on diet, improving your protein intake, having exercise to make sure you're not losing muscle mass is something that's necessary with these medications. Using them in microdose fashion, like I don't see people kind of, necessarily losing a lot of weight.
Yeah.
The other benefit of this is it actually does shift the satiety centers in your brain. Okay. Yeah. So, we have a lot of people that, drink a lot less alcohol, eat a lot less sugar, smoke a lot less because of the GLP-1s, because it, activates certain areas of satiety. And I think that's, that obviously has a lot of downstream health benefits.
Wow.
Just based on that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've never heard of microdosing it, but, I'm curious about it.
Yeah. Something to look into.
Yeah. You mentioned that you meditate regularly, and, I know you've had some experience with psychedelics and plant medicine and that sort of stuff. So how has this whole experience affected your medical practice?
I think psychedelics are going to be a big part in transforming the way we approach mental health, because the breakthroughs that you can have on psychedelics with trained professionals administering and integrating afterwards can be very profound. And so, I've had had the fortune of being in, basically, I don't know if I should say this on camera. I've had the fortune of being in, trying all these psychedelics and being in a lot of these situations and having kind of guides guide me through the process. And I truly believe that's kind of made me a better person fundamentally, and kind of helped me deal with a lot of the, perhaps, issues that I was dealing with from, young age and early adulthood. And I've honestly seen that in many people that we've sent for these kind of psychedelic retreats or psychedelic sessions, whether it be, 5-MeO DMT or psilocybin or MDMA or ketamine. Like there's a place for all of these things when done appropriately. Okay. They can certainly be abused and done inappropriately, but when done in the right set and setting, they can be very powerful agents of transformation.
Yeah, I have a habit that I've done over the last few years where I'll just take myself off to, say, the mountains. Like I go upstate, I get 3 or 4 grams of mushrooms and I just take them and sit there and think.
Yeah, and think.
And it's powerful.
And think. It's powerful.
And it's like it's a strange reset. It's like a hard reset. And I came up with a bunch of ideas and directions for the next few years because I was feeling a little bit lost on my last trip, like October last year. I sat there and had this big trip. I was by myself in the Catskills, on the tail end of, seeing Jesus, I got some notepads out and some sticky notes, and I just started like putting them on the wall and kind of mapping out the directions. And now I have a better, clearer idea of where I want to take things. And that was from going away and being alone and using these. So huge proponent of it. I
love that.
I've not done ayahuasca. I've not done any of those more intense experiences. They kind of scare me, but for now, huge fan. Also microdosing mushrooms. There was a little while where I spent a few months just doing 0.1 of a gram of mushrooms every morning. And I found that I didn't realize it, but I was actually undiagnosed ADHD. And in the process of taking this microdose of mushrooms, I don't know if this has been tested or studied in any meaningful way, but my symptoms of ADHD dropped precipitously. I was able to focus so much more. I was much more creative. I was generally happier. It was strange.
And everything you say is what I believe in as well. Psychedelics. I mean, microdosing mushrooms does help with depression.
Yeah, wow.
And it can help with focus, and it can improve creativity. It just improves neuroplasticity in the brain. I think LSD has many of those kind of similar potential properties.
Do you have a preference between the two when you're in your personal setting or a clinical setting?
Well, clinically, we don't use psilocybin or LSD. That's not legal at this point. It's just based on
from experiences of other people.
From experience of other people, I would say that both microdosing LSD and psilocybin have their places. Okay, microdosing psilocybin I've seen be quite helpful for depression. Yeah, and I think there's actually clinical evidence on that at this point. And so, MDMA can be very helpful for PTSD. Yeah. There's studies demonstrating that.
And you do the ketamine therapy as well.
Yes. And ketamine is very helpful for depression, but I also see that as, you can get really deep breakthroughs with ketamine, as in, it's a dissociative, and, you kind of leave your default mode network and are able to kind of see yourself and your problems and explore your subconscious and see yourself from a third person perspective, which is really powerful. Wow. And so, I've had, lots of people have significant breakthroughs on ketamine. Once again, it does need
with a psychiatrist.
You should have proper integration afterwards. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to pick your brain on some potential people to go to in this space, because it's been something I've wanted to explore for a while.
You're welcome to come in and try a little session.
Well, I might. It's a little bit scary when you start doing these things that can potentially impact your mind. You're like, oh, do I want to do this right now? Am I ready for it? Do I have time to sit there and process 10 years of trauma in the next few months? You know what I mean? It's like, do I want to unlock this door just yet?
What I say is never be afraid of your own mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's with you at all times, right?
You kind of want to know the little nooks and crannies. You kind of want things to come up. Like, you don't want to have repressed feelings, emotions, trauma. You kind of want to deal with all that.
I think it's important to not run away from them, for sure. And the way I think of it is, these things are going to be impacting your decision making, either explicitly or implicitly.
Correct.
So you'd rather at least know that they're there, as opposed to just having them in the background and you making these maybe not optimal life decisions and then wondering why things aren't the way you want them to, because you've never actually tackled why you're making the decisions you're making and what's the stems of these
that's right.
These poor decisions potentially. So let's do it. You mentioned that what was it? You take a few things for testosterone. What are your testosterone levels?
I mean, I like to keep mine between 800 and 1200.
Damn.
And so, listen.
Is that free testosterone, or is that total?
No, that's total. Okay. Free is like, 80 to 100. Okay. I feel the best at those levels, and it's been a little, every man has his kind of pathway to get to those levels.
And
so Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to do that, whether you're, using exogenous versus trying to stimulate your body to do its own.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm seeing there's an epidemic of guys with low T, like guys in their 30s and 40s, like it's almost a rarity that I see someone that's, in their 800s these days. So yeah, kind of T boosting strategies are honestly a big part of what we do. Yeah.
Do you like, I spent some time on this a little while ago, and I came across Tonkadali.
Yes.
And I took it, and my testosterone went up by 50% in 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Really? It was on Tonkadali.
Yeah, it was from a pretty low base, but
okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I mean, I typically don't see that working that well.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would consider a hyper responder,
Potentially.
Yeah.
Maybe that one and icing my balls. A combination of the two.
I don't know. Maybe it's the latter. I mean, Tonkadali, Fedogia agressus. There's a few of these natural supplements that can help with that. But, in my clinical experience, like if you're starting at like 300 or 400.
Yeah, it went from 400 to 600.
Really? Okay. Yeah. That's not bad. I mean, but you're not going to get from 300 to 800 on Tonkadali. Yeah. You're just not, Yeah.
It also then made me feel really sick after a while. Like I got some
really
really bad. And so I stopped taking it.
Got it. Okay.
On that note, I sent you my bloods. Did you end up going to have a chance to go through them?
I went through one of the panels. And everything actually looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're in good shape. Yeah.
That's good.
I saw your T levels. They look
can't even remember what they are.
They were in like some Australian measurement, but I was like kind of looking at the ranges. Yeah, kangaroo units. But as I recall, like your free T and your T were pretty good. I mean, all your other markers from what I saw looked pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not taking any testosterone boosting supplements.
Okay,
a tiny bit of zinc.
Zinc, yeah,
tiny.
Okay.
But I spent a month and a half in Australia, and I went to every day I was going to this kind of private wellness gym place that had a co-working spot, sauna, cold plunge, and a gym. And I was just with my friend, the semaglutide. What is it? How do I say it?
Semaglutide.
Semaglutide, yeah. That guy, we would hang out every day and we just co-work. And I was doing a sauna and cold plunge, half an hour in the sauna and a minute and a half cold plunge every single day, and working out every single day, and doing the cold therapy on testicular cold therapy. And and then I got my bloods done just before I came back, and they were pretty solid.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably that caused the increase rather than Fedogia.
I wasn't taking anything.
Yeah.
So
okay.
At all, nothing.
I mean, the best way to increase your T levels is to lift heavy weights.
Yeah.
Probably the best way to kind of naturally stimulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Sauna, cold plunge and ice to the balls, that can help too.
Yeah. One of my friends, I should connect you guys actually. His name's Lucas Aon. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He's probably one of the biggest biohackers in Australia.
Okay.
And yeah, he was talking about the ice over the icing the testicles thing for like 5 years ago, and it's kind of become his thing. I'll connect you guys. You guys would be great together.
Funny. Okay, I love that. Yeah.
So look, I'd like to just explore a few general philosophical ideas before we wrap up.
Sure.
What's the biggest thing over the last few years that you've changed your mind on?
That traditional medicine is always right, and a lot of these alternative therapies are just kind of like woo-woo.
Quacks.
Okay, yeah. As in I'm still a traditional medicine background trained. I still practice traditional medicine in my kind of interventional pain clinic, but lasers and infrared and ultrasound and a lot of these modalities really do work.
Yeah.
Okay, but they're just kind of ignored or poo-pooed by just the traditional medical establishment. Things like ozone. Okay. I love ozone. I use it a lot. That's just, no one in traditional medicine knows about stuff like this. So yeah, my views have changed a little, over time.
Yeah.
To kind of really, being very wide open-eyed about some of these alternative modalities that I really believe can work. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten more and more esoteric as time's gone on. You know, I started off very, if this can't be proven clearly, I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got an engineering degree, and my brain is very analytical in my thought. And then I would continue to have all of these unexplainable things happen in my life that you just don't really have an answer for. And you have to kind of begin to let go, I feel.
Yeah, you do. There's not a rationale for everything.
There's not.
Okay?
There's not.
And I promise, you know, I'm quite confident that there's another force out there that governs many of the things.
Yeah.
And that fate is a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when I hear people talk about, say, like energy, I would just shut off and be like, oh, here we fucking go.
Yeah.
But now the more I think about it, it's everything is energy.
Everything
is
energy.
a vibrational field.
Correct. Yeah.
And to think that does not impact your day-to-day experience is probably naive. And yeah, I went through have you ever done a Vipassana? I heard you did.
I have, yeah.
So I did a Vipassana a couple of years ago, the first one. I haven't done one since. I'm still a bit scarred, but I'll come back to it at some point. And I remember, you know, he talks about the subtle vibrations for the first few days. For anyone listening that doesn't know what this is, basically you're meditating for 12 hours a day, 10 days. You have no external stimuli. So you pretty much go as internal as you possibly can in a safe environment. And you begin to become really, really in tune with some things that you've never felt before. I don't know if you felt the same. And the vibration thing freaked me out. I remember I felt like I was buzzing and I couldn't sleep because I was buzzing so much. Like, and then
tuning into your internal frequency.
Oh man!
You know?
But how do you reconcile that? You know, you kind of the reconciliation is, oh, I'm so unaware of what is actually going on in the world, the reality of what's going on in the world. I think I need to be a little more open and curious to some things that maybe don't necessarily make sense on the surface, but potentially have had thousands of years of anecdotal evidence.
Right.
Which I think is what's been missed in the Western medical fields, is that trust on the ancient wisdom.
Yes.
I think we're coming back to very slowly.
I think we are. Yeah, I think we are. I think more and more people are open to these alternative therapies, and you know, there's just a lot of failings of the medical system. You know, we all know what those are, and you know, people are looking for alternative answers. Yeah.
I mean, I like to think of Western medicine as a good tool if you've lost an arm, and maybe a bad tool for chronic systemic issues.
Correct. Yeah.
And I think the combination of the two is the sweet spot that I hope that the rest of the medical field moves towards.
I think it will. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. I mean, you know, these things work. You know, at the end of the day, it's just, you know, all I care about is whether something actually is effective and it works. And so, you know, preventative medicine is just going to prevent chronic illness, which, you know, has a certain monetary value tied to that, you know.
You said it was like 4 or 5x return on investment versus dealing with it once you've got a disease.
Correct. Yeah. And so, you know, the average, you know, you're going to be spending a lot less money preventing disease and treating it. And
the opportunity cost as well.
Totally. And so, you know, the system is going to shift towards that. It already is shifting towards that. You know, it's still like, when will insurance companies start reimbursing for things like peptides and PRP and regenerative medicine? You know, like PRP has been around for 15, 20 years now, and it clearly works, right? Like there's not a single
PRP
insurance.
For somebody that doesn't know the
platelet-rich plasma.
Okay.
Platelet-rich plasma. It's just taking your own blood. It has taking your own blood, taking the platelets and injecting that in all sorts of places, right? Yeah. Like that works for injuries, for, you know, all sorts of stuff. And there's not a single insurance right now that covers that, like, you know, 10, 15 years later. So, you know, my hope is that all of these newest kind of, you know, the longevity things that I talk about, the regen medicine, the peptides, will be eventually covered by, you know, a forward-thinking insurance company. But that's kind of yet to be seen. We'll see where that goes.
Do you think half of the problems of the medical system are the insurance component?
I mean, it's yes, there are entrenched interests that are very hard to break, right? And then you have the pharmaceutical companies, and you have the pharmacy benefit managers, and then you have the insurance companies, and then, you know, I mean, everyone has a hand in the pie, right? I mean, out of every dollar that's spent in U.S. healthcare, like, you know, what percentages go to each component? And these are
I don't even know those numbers.
I mean, it's you know, administrative costs they're a huge burden. You know, the pharmacy benefit managers are way too big for their own good. You know, pharma companies have their entrenched interests. I mean, it's going to be hard to kind of break these things. I mean, RFK, I think, is going to go in and try and make a difference. But, you know,
honestly,
big pharma is tied to, you know, these are like multi-billion-dollar companies with their own kind of interest profiles, and it's just the way the system's set up. You know, I wouldn't say that, you know, necessarily blaming anyone, but, you know, the actual money that kind of comes down to, you know, either patient care or, you know, reimbursing physicians is, you know,
it's a weird one, isn't it? Yeah. It's a weird one because it's people's lives, you know, as opposed to just numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's true. And I mean, the US spends the most per capita on healthcare in the entire world, and you get the worst outcomes. The outcomes are terrible. And so
this country scares the shit out of me.
I mean, hey, listen, there's a lot of other health systems that, you know, they all inherently have their problems as well. I mean, there's no perfect system out there. Yeah. Right. But, you know, I hope a lot of change and reform can be done to our current system.
Yeah. Do you think it's change, like an external push that's the only way it's going to change? Or maybe they'll, like, what's the economic value driver if you're an insurance company and you begin to look at preventative medicine? They're going to spend less money overall. Like, how does that turn into a P&L?
I mean, the only thing that's going to drive an insurance company to cover this is if they actually can demonstrate
they're going to make money
lower costs.
Yeah.
I mean, lower costs, lower spend per patient. And if they could make more money, I mean, that's kind of the only way that I see that changing. And I see that changing by, you know, actually presenting the data that preventative care can save X amount of dollars over a lifetime of a patient. I mean, those studies are going to take a long, long time, right? As in, you know, they're like hard to study. Some of them are hard to study.
So the insurance company basically needs to have a patient, have someone with them for 20, 30, 40 years as a customer for it to
recoup the benefits. To recoup the benefits of providing that preventative care when they were not that sick. You know?
Yeah. Versus, you know, like maybe having people switch around to 10 different places and then one of them gets unlucky and gets hit with a $100,000 bill. And then, you know, every second one of them they manage to get out of by, you know, some shit that they pull.
Yeah. It's just, ultimately that bill falls on Medicare. You know, I mean, you turn 65, you get Medicare, and it's the government's problem.
Which is everyone's problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why the healthcare bills are so high. Yeah.
Damn. Well, I can always go back to Australia. What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Oh, I mean, my patients are so great to me. Like, you know, I get, you know, food and gifts and presents from them all the time. Like, I've had, you know, patients like kind of invite me on, you know, pretty crazy trips. So, I mean,
do you take them? Do you ever go on any fun, crazy trips? You got any fun stories you want to share?
You know,
you can redact names.
Yeah, I can redact names. I mean, you know, when you have a long-term relationship with some of these patients that, you know, you are helping them, I mean, they honestly become friends. Okay. Yeah. And then, so that relationship feels very natural. Yeah. You know, I mean, I never to take advantage of a situation, but, you know, people have been very generous to me. And so, you know, obviously that's a really beautiful feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you take that generosity and then apply it to your own life and the way you give to the world?
Great question. I mean, hey, listen, I mean, I believe I'm a giver at heart. Okay. And so, you know, believe it or not, I mean, I still actually see patients with the worst insurances possible, the Medicaid patients, because they're part of this Chinese community that I've kind of served for a very long time. So, every Wednesday I go and I see all these patients that, I may or may not get reimbursed for, but it's just something that I just do. Yeah. And hey, I mean, while most of my patients now are just in a different kind of life circumstance, like, I do want to, democratize the process and make these available for more people. And, there's, I have a kind of, charitable foundation that, I kind of want to put more efforts into as my career kind of advances.
You've spoken about precision health equity. Is this something you've spoken about in the past, or is it a term that you've?
Precision health equity. I mean, precision health is, I guess, the N of one, where you kind of like dive really deeply into one person's kind of, biology and kind of do everything that you can for that one individual. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of time and costs, right? Of just the, the sheer amount of testing and thought process that you need to give to one person.
Yeah.
Democratizing that process.
It's hard.
It's hard. I think it's going to be much more advanced with AI. Yeah. AI is going to really make that process just so much easier in terms of, data aggregation and seeing patterns and trends. And, that's my thought process on that. As of right now, it's a fully optimized one human being, with kind of the most advanced kind of longevity therapeutics and diagnostics. Like that's very expensive. Yeah.
So when's the extension app coming out?
We're working on it. We're working on, a comprehensive kind of AI platform that kind of aggregates our data, kind of, assists with a decision-making process that, kind of also has outcome measures built in. And so we can kind of really track our outcomes. That's the most important part, I think, of what we need to do is really kind of have the data that backs, all these therapeutics that we're doing. And so that's something that we're actively working on. Yeah.
Is there anybody, or is it even medically possible? Like you've got your glucose monitors. Is there a way for them to be the equivalent of taking a blood test every second and like getting all of that data? Can that happen?
Totally. Is that
something that people are working on?
Hey, for sure. It's happening and it's going to happen.
Oh, really?
As of right now, you can already live measure glucose levels. I mean, very soon, maybe not very soon, but you're going to be able to wear a device that can track all of your numbers, all of your hormones, your metabolic numbers, your kind of, blood counts, your blood oxygen. Like
where would that need to be metrics on your body? Like, because they don't go into your blood, right? So how would you?
So the glucose monitors have they're a small little needle that drives a little plastic filter, and then you're measuring kind of like interstitial fluid, which can only measure so much.
Which is what, the fluid between the skin and the.
Yeah, just measuring the kind of interstitial fluid that's literally just like, less than a centimeter deep from the skin. Okay. There's only so much you can measure from that, right? Can I think of like an implantable device in the future that can actually lifetime monitor everything that's going on in your bloodstream? Yes, there could be. There could be little, either an implantable device or a nanorobot or something that can do that, right? I think that is going to be the future.
Wow. It's an exciting time, isn't it?
It's an exciting time.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah. The brain computing interface, like the ability to track and monitor all your biomarkers in real time. Yeah. And then the ability to deliver medications in real time as well. Yeah. Right. Like there could be, these, whether it's an injection that you get at your doctor's office, like once a year that contains basically, all the peptides, gene therapies, mRNAs, like, everything that you need customized to your body. Like, I think that's coming within the next 5-10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just got to make it that far,
I think just keep your shit together.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep your shit together and technology is going to fix a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And become the AI overlords. Yes. One of the two ways. We don't know. We'll see where it goes. Is there, if you could only recommend one book for somebody to read over and over again for the rest of their life, what would it be?
Oh, wow. The Giving Tree by Sheldon something.
Let's have a look.
Look that up.
Yeah. Why do you like it?
It's literally a children's book.
Shel Silverstein?
Yeah, Sheldon Silverstein, The Giving Tree. It's literally just like a few words on a page, and it describes a relationship between a little boy and a tree, and the little boy grows older and wants more and more and more and more, and the tree keeps giving and giving and giving and giving until it can't give no more. And there's a kind of a deep moral sense that you get from this very simple children's book.
What's the moral sense?
Be happy and content with what you have.
Mm.
Yes. At all stages of your life. We all have desires. We all have wants. But, live in the moment and just be grateful for all the things that you already have. Yeah.
Great. Dr. Kuo, I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Okay, fantastic.
So thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Awesome. Awesome. And for those who have made it this far, please go to YouTube, search That One Time with Adam Metwally, click subscribe, like the video, and leave us a comment.
Great.
All right.